Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming. I'll make it quick, actually. We have a lot of exciting research presentations and panels, and I'll probably be the most boring presentation here today, so we'll make it quick. As Emily said, my name is Bapu Vaitla. I'm a fellow at Data2X. I've been involved with the Big Data and Gender portfolio for about 5 years. So my job here is to give you a sense of the historical frame of Data2X. Emily's happily covered a lot of this ground, so I'll make that quick, and also give you a sense of what are the lessons that we learned from our portfolio of grantees over the last couple of years. And some of these key messages, all of these key messages, are in the report that you'll see in the folder on your table. So to start with, just a quick overview of our engagement with big data over the past few years. We started a few years ago looking at proofs of concept, just seeing what were the frontier applications of big data to gender questions. And there, we really focused on understanding, okay, is this even possible? Is it possible to fill key gender data gaps with these new forms of digital data? The more recent phase in the last few years, we've looked more to methodologies that are already ready to scale up. So the proofs of concept stage as that stage has passed, and these methodologies are perhaps ready to be integrated in national statistical systems and other large-scale data systems. We looked for researchers that had a strong scientific background, but also were proactively engaging with the policy environment, with policymakers. Some of them had connections to public sector agencies. Others, like GovLab, have as their mandate this kind of interface between policy and science and how science can have an impact. We also looked for situations where people were working with multiple data types, both different types of big data, for example, a combination of cell phone data and geospatial data, or with a combination of traditional data types and digital data types. And one of the points that I think our report really brings out is that in almost every application of big data, conventional data plays a critical role, either for validation or for interpretation of the results or for some other purpose. We also looked for researchers who had done the work of obtaining access to data, at least in some form. As we know, the regulatory environment is rapidly changing, and kind of one of our meta lessons that we learned here is that researchers may have access, but that access can quickly disappear or change, or the conditions of access can quickly change. And I think we as a community need to think about how do we create standardized regulations and forms of data sharing and data access that apply across governments, across multilateral institutions, across NGOs, across universities. So we opened up our granting process in a grand challenge format where we invited open proposals from the data science community on gender questions. And as Emily noted, we received a lot of interest, over 120 applications, I believe, and we granted 10 research teams funds to carry out their work. We also, as Emily also alluded to, we're also doing simultaneous work on two important areas. One is the algorithmic, the set of algorithmic bias questions that we talked about in the last panel, but also on this idea of equal participation of not just women, but all kinds of social groups in the data science community. So just to give a quick overview of the grantees, and you'll see this again in your folder. We looked at topics as diverse as urban mobility in Chile, school enrollment in Pakistan, mobile money in Uganda, agricultural livelihoods in Nepal. I'll just let you read this. I don't need to read this for you. So a very diverse set of researchers, a very diverse set of topics and locations and scales as well. So all of these projects are summarized in a small, brief format in the report that you have on your table. So 5 major lessons that we've learned from this set of research projects. One is confirming what we had already seen in our first round of projects, which is that big data, in fact, can offer unique insights into the lives of women and girls. And when we say unique insights, we mean Two different things, really. First, it's a question of granularity, that we can improve the resolution of data in both time and space using digital data. We can, for example, look at the level of the individual instead of the level of the household, which is typical for, say, survey-based data. We can also, for some indicators, for some variables, we can also essentially have a real-time kind of streaming informational system, so very high resolution in time as well. We also are able to observe phenomena that are just not really possible to look at with other types of data. And one of those pieces of knowledge is socioeconomic welfare of individuals. Again, it's really hard to separate what's happening between different household members and really get at intra-household well-being. And some forms of digital data, big data, enable you to do that. Second, big message that there are a lot of methods, a lot of data types that are ready to scale, incorporate into national statistical systems, or other large-scale systems, and also integrate with traditional forms of data, which I alluded to before. And that kind of scaling up at high resolution allows you to do more precise program targeting, for one thing, and also to design policies that are responsive to needs that differ over time, quickly, and also across space. And the traditional, again, to reiterate this point, traditional data sources are always needed at this stage of the development of big data, either for the purposes of validating the data sets themselves or interpreting them or setting the context. Third message, we've talked about this. This is really the concern that's up front. It should be up front. We're kind of at this critical juncture where if we don't address these issues of bias, and there's already starting to be a backlash against digital data for reasons of privacy and security, and the issues of representation are also now taking center stage. And the time is really now to proactively address these issues. We know that part of the bias is generated, as the panelists said, by lack of representation within samples themselves. That comes in part from gendered access to technology. And also there is algorithm bias simply reflects the biases of society. Programmers and their institutions don't exist in a vacuum. They exist in a cultural context, and that's where we see the origin of these biases. Fourth message, again, an issue that needs to be confronted right now, privacy and security. We can't really wait on this. We know we've seen the headlines over the past couple of years about the backlash against social media and other sources of big data. We know the potential, but that potential will be constrained if we don't confront in a legal sense what we need to do to realize the potential while protecting individual privacy and the security of data holders. And of course, with women and girls, there are specific risks. Let me go back. Specific risks involved, particularly in cultural and social contexts where women don't have avenues for legal complaint or redress. Again, to strike the same note of optimism that the last panelist did, we know that there are effective security protocols. They're available for a lot of data types. They're effective. And I think we need to really move the conversation towards how do we implement those solutions. Final point I'll make is a less technical one. It's a political one. There is a question about what the role of power is in determining kind of this entire conversation about bias. There's a new concept it's called data feminism that was developed by Lauren Klein at Georgia Tech and Catherine D'Ignazio at MIT. They have a new book called Data Feminism that really talks about all of these issues of bias and representation in the context of the questions of who has power, who doesn't, why do some people have power and not, and how do these differentials in power results reflect and shape equality and justice. And we, Data2X, going forward, really would like to consider these issues of power and participation and how they manifest these technical and social obstacles. So I'll stop there. We have a great lineup of a lot of the projects that I talked about you'll hear about in detail. And I'll introduce the first, or is there a moderator for the next session that I can? Andrew Young from GovLab will introduce the next set of researchers and speakers.